Well, guys, it's been a great semester, and pleasure to be in class with you guys over the past several months. I learned a lot with you guys, had a great time in class with you, and I wanted to wrap my part of the semester up with a talk about humility as strength in leadership. As we've been going over leadership, as we've been talking about it, the one thing that's really stood out to me in a lot of the things we've been reading is how important humility is. And I think humility is a key strength for those who seek to be leaders, especially in the field of interpretation. So, what is humility? If you go to the dictionary, the simple definition is that humility is the act or state of being humble. You can take it a step further, expand it a little bit, and humility can be defined as the quality or state of not thinking you are better than other people. The Rabbi Joseph Telushkin said that humility means not regarding ourselves as more important than other people, including those who have achieved less than we have. And it implies judging ourselves not in comparison with others, but in light of our capabilities. Humility is key. It's a leadership trait that all leaders should have. So how do we identify humility and a leader who has humility? I think one of the easiest ways to identify humility in a leader is to look at leaders who lack humility. What are the traits of leaders who don't have any humility at all? We could probably write books about it. We could probably write lists that are pages long. I've boiled it down to 5 key traits that I think really define a leader who lacks humility. A leader who lacks humility rules with an iron fist. They have the attitude that it's my way or the highway. They're inflexible. They're unwilling to shift. They won't look at any other options but their own. If you bring an idea to them in a meeting, they're unwilling to listen to it, especially if they've already stated an idea of how they want a task to be done. So a leader who lacks humility just doesn't have the desire to listen to anybody else but themselves. A leader who lacks humility never takes responsibility when something goes wrong, or very rarely they take responsibility when something goes wrong. I remember my first job out of college. I was working in a bookstore, now a defunct bookstore, it doesn't exist anymore. But the first manager who I worked under was awesome. Great leader, hard at times, but she got the job done, and it got her promoted. Our new manager came in, and it was a person who was greatly lacking in humility. And one way that really shined out was he wouldn't take responsibility for decisions that he made that went wrong. Remember, it was the holiday season. We had all kinds of merchandise coming in, and he called me out to set up a display. And so he gave me a diagram, told me this is how I want to set it up, and I did it. I set it up the way he asked me to set it up, and the next day the regional manager was supposed to be there. And the regional manager came, the regional manager looked at this display, and he didn't like it one bit. Did not like how it was set up, thought it was just awful. And instead of this manager saying, my bad, I thought this would be a good way to set it up, I'll have it changed. Can you give me some ideas of how you'd like it to look? Instead, he basically threw me under the bus and said that he didn't know why the person who'd done it did it that way. It was wrong. He was sorry. And he'd have it changed immediately, even though he was the one that made the decision. So a leader will take responsibility when something goes wrong. A leader who lacks humility doesn't do it. Leaders who lack humility find it very hard to apologize when they are wrong. So they know they're wrong, they know they've done wrong, but they just won't apologize for it. So it kind of goes along with they won't take responsibility, and even if they know they're wrong, they can't apologize for it. A leader who lacks humility thinks they know the answer to everything, and they're unwilling to listen to others. You've got a meeting, you've got a task to get done, and there's all kinds of ideas being thrown out there, but the leader thinks they know everything. I've got the idea, I've got the perfect solution, this is it, we're going to do it this way, and boom. So, meeting adjourned. So, a leader who lacks humility is not willing to listen to what others have to say. And a leader who lacks humility is a self-promoter. It's all about what can this do for me? Where can it get me? Will it get me promotion? Will it get me a raise? Will it get me glory? What will it get me? Not about what will it do for the team. How can I help my followers? It's all about me, me, me. A leader who lacks humility is very egocentric. So now that we've seen what the traits of a leader lacking humility are, let's look at some traits of a humble leader. A humble leader is going to promote the betterment of their team. A leader who promotes the betterment of their team gives credit where credit is due. I can think of several leaders in my past who gave me and teams I worked with tasks not to get themselves glory, but to help us build our resumes, to have something to put on there to say, hey, I've got experience doing a certain task. So a humble leader is going to do the exact same thing. And when that task is completed, and if that task is completed properly and praise is bestowed upon that leader, and instead of the leader just basking in the glory, says, to the person who's judging, who is evaluating, that, thank you very much. I really couldn't have done it without the team I worked with. It was a great team. And I'll pass on your praise and your thanks for this accomplishment. A humble leader is going to be flexible, and I mean flexible. They're going to do some crazy yoga moves. They are going to be able to shift gears when the need arises. When you have a task, when you have a job you're trying to get done, sometimes you don't know what's going to happen. And some things will arise that demand great flexibility. A leader who lacks humility is not going to be flexible. Again, it's my way or the highway. We're going to keep going straight ahead, full speed, even if it wrecks us. But a leader who is humble is going to say, okay, we need to shift gears a little bit, and we need to think of a different way to get these things done. A flexible leader is going to use principles such as framing. Instead of looking at the narrow frame, they're going to look at the wide frame. They're going to multi-track. They're going to use different principles to get projects done. Multi-tracking, I think, is a very important trait of a humble leader because multi-tracking helps to keep ego in check. And ego is one of the biggest leadership killers that there can be. People lose respect for leaders who have a holier than thou, I'm a high and mighty person. They lose respect for self-promoters. They don't want to listen to them. They don't want to follow them. So multi-tracking is a very important principle in helping you in keeping staying flexible and keeping that ego in check. And going along with that, a humble leader never lets their experience inflate their ego. Many leaders are several years in to a career, into a position, more years than those who are underneath them. But they will never let that experience make them feel like they are better than those who are under them. A humble leader knows that those people down there are where they were before, and they don't have an attitude that I am better than you because I have come further, I've been here longer, or any other ways that you can put that. A humble leader is ready to be wrong. They're willing to move forward and get the job done without shifting the blame to others. So when something doesn't go right and they get called in before their boss and their boss says, hey, this project, it's not being done correctly. What's the problem? They don't say that their team's at fault. They don't say that it is entirely out of their hands. They're the leader. They're the one who is supposed to be supervising, supposed to be listening, supposed to be making sure that the people have what they need, are able to accomplish the task. And if there's a problem, they're the ones we should be helping to fix it. And if they're not helping to fix it, they can't offer any other blame. They can't put the blame on anybody else but themselves. A humble leader has an open door. A leader who sits up in an ivory tower, is unwilling to listen to problems or offer any advice to people. That kind of a leader, again, is not a leader anybody is going to want to follow. But a leader who has an open door, who their subordinates are willing to come to and say, hey, I've got a problem about this. Hey, we've got an issue with this. Can I sit down and talk to you about this? Either if you have time now or any time later, we can schedule something, but I really need to talk to you about it. A humble leader is going to say, sure, yeah. Feel free to come to me at any time, and we'll discuss this certain issue. And a humble leader is going to help promote change. That's what interpretation is all about. Interpretation is all about change. So a humble leader is going to help promote change. I think it's something that we can all, as interpreters, readily we can connect to it. The idea of promoting change. A humble leader is going to inspire the people beneath them, underneath them, the subordinates, to want to change the way things are done, or how things are looked at. David William Torbert wrote in a Harvard Business Review about the 7 action logics. An action logic is defined as how a leader interprets their own and others' behavior and how they maintain power to protect against threats. And there are seven types of action logics. The first I describe is the opportunist. The opportunist is a person who will win in any way possible. And that's not always a bad thing to have in a leader, but I think more often than not, it's not a good thing. Because they'll take shortcuts, they can get people hurt, they can get people in trouble, they can take unethical routes. An opportunist is not necessarily someone you want leading you. On the converse side, you have the diplomat. The diplomat wears the kid gloves. They avoid conflict. They don't want to upset the apple cart. So if something's going wrong, they're not willing to say anything about it. They won't step forward as a leader and say, no, this isn't how we're going to do things. We need to think of something different. The next action logic is the expert. Experts rule by logic and expertise. They're clear thinkers. They've been there. They know what they're doing. And 38% of leaders fall into this category of expert. Following the expert, you have the achiever. The achiever meets strategic and agency goals, so they will meet the goals, but still they haven't made it to the highest level they need to get. They're meeting those goals, but something still isn't quite there. Following the achiever, you have the individualist. The individuals will operate in unconventional ways. So they're willing to go outside, think outside the box, to get tasks done. It is kind of that win any way possible, but they are also going to think logically. They want to achieve those goals for their agency. But they're just not going to do it in the same way as maybe anyone else will. Then you get to the 2 highest action logics. These 2 make up 5% of all leaders. The strategist generates organizational and personal change. The strategist is going to move into an organization and get them to change the way they see things, the way they do things. Not only are they going to change the organization, but the people who work under them. are going to be inspired to change by a leader who is a strategist. And then you have the top 1% of leaders. The top 1% of leaders are what are called alchemists. These leaders, they generate social transformations. Alchemy is the ancient science of trying to turn other metals into gold. And you may not be able to do it with lead, but you can do it with people. You can generate social change. Nelson Mandela was 1 in a million. He was an alchemist. He generated social change. Martin Luther King Jr. was an alchemist. He generated social change. These leaders are hard to come by, but many of them tend to be humble leaders. A humble leader is going to fall into that top 5%. Now, what are some ways that we personally can develop humility as a leader? Again, there are books about this, but there are 3 things I find most important if you would like to develop humility as a leader, if you want to be a strong leader who is also humble. One of those first things is to remember that you were once in the shoes of those you now lead. Many of the chiefs of interpretation were GS-13s. They were once GS-4, GS-5s. I met the director of the National Park Service once, and he started out in 1976 as a park guide at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. And having seen him in these past months, especially with the government shutdown, he knows where we've come from. He's been in our shoes. Even though he's a political appointee, he has been through the ranks of the National Park Service. And so, by seeing others as being in the shoes you once filled, you take your ego out of the equation. You say, hey, I'm not better than they are. I was once there. And you're able to think like those who you are leading. You have to develop flexibility. There may be one problem, but there can be many ways of looking at it and many ways to solving it. So if a humble leader is willing to listen to those who offer different solutions, they're willing to be flexible with how to solve those problems. They'll even listen to the ideas that are absolutely absurd, crazy, way off the beaten path, but they're willing to listen to them. They're willing to try and take a look, and they will be flexible in how they try to solve those problems. And a humble leader practices what the Heath brothers in their book Decisive called procedural justice. I think this is a very important trait of humility. Procedural justice ensures that the procedures used to make a certain decision are just, they're ethical, they're correct, as opposed to distributive justice, which is only concerned with getting credit and divvying up spoils. Again, it's an ego thing. A leader who has a high ego is only concerned with making sure they get their credit for something being done correctly. And if they're part of a team, they may divvy up the spoils. But a humble leader is not going to be looking at who gets the credit. Again, remember, a humble leader is not a self-promoter. They promote the benefit to the benefit of those who are following them. So a leader who puts others before themselves is sometimes seen as weak, ineffective. But when we put ourselves behind others, we put others before ourselves, and we are willing to listen to be flexible, to come down to the level of those who are following our lead, to act out of fairness and justice, promote teamwork, then we will gain a cadre of individuals who will follow and be an effective unit to promote change. And that is what interpretation is all about. We are trying to promote and effect change. And in order to do that, you need to have a leader who is humble. And a humble leader is a strong leader. A humble leader is a leader that people are willing to follow. You guys have been a great class. It's been a great semester. I really hope to see you guys next semester. If not all of you, at least some of you. And I hope you all have a great holiday season with your families. So with that, I've run over a little bit. Have a great holiday season, guys. Bye.